Morning, Cal. Morning, Catherine. Say, Mary, I really enjoyed your letter in the paper yesterday. I'm in complete agreement with you about Melrose Avenue. I've lived on Melrose Court for 61 years. And you know what I think they should do? I think they should put a 4-lane superhighway paralleling the Interstate Railroad. That railroad has been there for 135 years, carrying millions of tons of freight and hundreds and thousands of people, and it's still running 6 trains a day. I hear them at night. After the trains go through, for 10 or 15 minutes, the windows will rattle for a bit. Morning, Bill. I imagine you've been to quite a few of these groundbreaking ceremonies. I'm not so sure I'm in agreement with this one, but don't get me wrong, I'm not referring to your design of the shopping plaza. It's a good thing Ed is running this ceremony. It will start on time. Ed is a man who gets things done. I told him I wouldn't talk for too long. What's that? Why, sure you can. That's right. Now give it a big swing. Up over your head like this. You'll get it. You'll get it. Now, would you hold on to it for me until the ceremony's over? Now, I've been ringing this bell for years. It's a tradition over in Japan to start swimming meets with ringing a bell. And when I saw that, I thought it was much nicer than shooting a starting gun. So I introduced the tradition right here over at the field house. I've watched many excited fans and swimmers get ready when they hear the bell. Oh, morning, Harry. My. Iowa City is growing so fast. It used to be I'd look into a crowd and know every person out there, but it's good to see some new faces. Irving Weber here. Here, in Iowa City, Johnson County, Iowa, in the heartland of America. 120 miles east of Des Moines and 45 miles west of the Mississippi. Now, I was born in this city on December 19th, 1900. Now, that makes me 94 years old. But never forget, you're as young as you feel. Some of you might not be familiar with Iowa. And there may have been a time when you were confused and called it Ohio or Idaho. Well, we Iowans understand and forgive you. When you get a chance, not now but after the ceremony, look up at the Capitol building over there and study the state flag. I imagine there are a few Iowans who could refresh their memories, just for fun. What are the colors? And what's in the center? Say, can you tell me what the state bird is? The goldfinch, right. And the state motto? Anyone? Well, it's, and our rights we will maintain, yes. When you get a moment, you might want to memorize the state song, the Song of Iowa, which is sung to the melody of O Tannenbaum. No, I'm not going to make you suffer through my singing. I'm not musical. I found that out early on when I was in Van Doren's juvenile marching band. We'd pay 50 cents a week, and I never could keep in step. I drove him wild. One day, in front of everyone, he said, "There's one guy in this band who won't ever make a musician, and that's Weber." I've always thanked him because I didn't waste any time with music. Although I do enjoy singing "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean." Some very interesting people came from this state. President Herbert Hoover, Buffalo Bill, and Grant Wood. I delivered milk to Grant Wood over on Port Street, number 1142. A brick house. It was built by the Oakes family, and Oakes is spelled O-A-K-E-S. One of the family corrected me at a funeral one time. I've known the family all my life. I should have known how to spell it, but I didn't. It was built in 1858. The bricks came from a lot over by the Longfellow School. Now, many of the buildings in early Iowa City are made from those bricks. When they began paving the downtown area, they used Purrington bricks, which were made over in Galesburg, Illinois. They're made from a blue clay. They're heated up to 1400 degrees, and they're about the hardest brick available. Just look down at the bricks around the fountains by the Holiday Inn, and you'll see Purrington. And now don't let me get off the track. Old men like to wander. Grant Wood, well, Grant Wood was not real sharp at paying his milk bills. He got delinquent. He was just careless. There wasn't any reason. Well, that's not a criticism, but that's how I met him. Over 500 million years ago, Iowa was underwater. You could have paddled from Pittsburgh to Denver. Then glaciers covered the state, and soon afterwards ice masses moved and flattened out any Iowa hills and left the richest, blackest soil in America. People don't know. We used to take ice out of the river. We put it in drinks. We'd chill them. Why we didn't get hydrophobia or something, I don't know. The Iceman would come along, he'd cut out a 50-pound chunk, and there'd be chips of ice that would fall off, and we would grab those. You get a long one, just like a sucker. You think where that ice came from. I'm amazed when people tell me they miss the sea. Funny, because there's plenty of water around. I've always found water to swim in. I think I've swam at all the mud holes in Johnson County at one time or another. I started out in Clear Creek behind Randall's Market in Coralville, and in my day, it was clear. It was up to my shoulders. The banks were about 20 feet high, so it was the best spot for sliding. And then I graduated to the Iowa River. Oh, I'd swim all the time, from Coralville to Iowa City. I swam in that river, skated on it, canoed on it, fished in it. You wouldn't believe the catfish in my day. This big! Swung from trees and landed it. Oh, I wasted my youth in that river. Of course, I love swimming pools. It must be the smell of the chlorine and the echo. Up until recently, I'd swim every day at the field house, but I have to be careful, I might slip. My stroke was the backstroke, and I've always thought the backstroke helped me in longevity. Certainly my arms are the stronger limb now. There are so many good swimmers at Iowa. I just love to watch them compete. Hanging onto the starting bar, feet up against the starting wall, then push backwards, head going under, and now the arms, and the rush of the flip turn. In 1920, I paddled down the Iowa and Cedar Rivers to the Mississippi, all the way down to Keokuk, passing the towns of Hills, Columbus Junction, Wapello, Oakville, and Burlington. Standing tall, I fantasized I was John Gilbert, the first white man to ever walk on Johnson County soil. On my way to trade with Chief Powashik, my good Indian friend, to trade his beaver tails, furs, and deer hides for my pots, pans, and rifles. Paddling under the blazing sun or hard rain, sleeping on sandbars, always amazed at this beautiful, untouched landscape. Over there is my first trading house, the American Fur Company, built without hammer or nails. It is splendid to be so close to the Indian towns. And further along, my new trading house on the wagon road to Muscatine. Over there is the first post office, of which President Van Buren appointed me postmaster. This I was not to know, however, as I became grievously ill and died before I was told. I was buried in a plain coffin over on the east side of the trading house. I was pleased when I was moved to a more permanent burial site over at Oakland Cemetery. My old friends Philip Clark and Eli Myers organized the move. Well, that was the least they could do. After all, I helped them stake out the first claims in Johnson County. Oh, sure. When they crossed the Mississippi, they had that look in their eye, land, untouched by white man. So I led them back to what is now Sand Orchard Road, about 4 miles south of the city. Come on, take these pieces of wood and mark it out yourselves. Get it all surveyed, you squatters, and sign the treaties with the Indians, which is what they did. They paid $1.25 an acre and had to walk to Dubuque, where the transaction was finalized. Why, look at that. A little imitation of my trading post up at City Park. And over there, the longest street in Iowa City, Gilbert Street. Imagine, a paved street named after me. Take a walk someday up to Oakland Cemetery and find John Gilbert's grave. It's unmarked because vandals stole the wooden marker years ago. Sometimes just looking at a grave, though, makes you stop and ask yourself some questions about the past. Maybe you'll feel nothing. Or maybe you'll feel a connection to the past. I don't know. It's not for me to say. That's a private matter. Oh, and while you're up at Oakland Cemetery, be sure to pass by the Black Angel. That monument is a good example of how the facts in history give way to myth and superstition. I'm amazed how many people are interested in made-up stories. Teresa Feldevert, an exotic name for Iowa City. She was from Strimmelov, Bohemia, a long way from the Mississippi River. She commissioned a Bohemian artist to make the monument, Teresa Feldevert. She was a midwife. What happened to her first husband? Her son died young. Her second husband died. Why did the angel turn black? When it was packed onto a flat car in Chicago, they dropped it in the river. They used the wrong metal. They shouldn't have washed it at the depot. If you kiss a virgin at midnight, it turns white. Oh, don't look at her face! It turned black because of the sins of the family. Since 1912, the Black Angel has watched lovers who sit at her feet and talk to the moon. Do you suppose she hears weeping mothers? And the giggling co-eds who go up there to be kissed in order to be a real co-ed? Just for fun, you might try to gather all the stories you hear about the Black Angel. It's certainly the most photographed monument up there. Oh, before I forget, there's a story that goes along with Philip Clark and Eli Myers. They're the two friends who made sure John Gilbert had a grave, remember? Well, they remained good friends, built their houses here, married, and had children. Clark laid out a town across from his farm and gave it the name Napoleon. A two-story courthouse was built there, and Napoleon became the first county seat of Johnson County. This area is referred to as Sand Road, and later South Gilbert Street. I think it's a shame it wasn't left Napoleon Road. It would remind us of the historical stories which took place there. Well, anyway, Clark and Myers held on to their taste for adventure, and when gold was discovered out in California in 1848, they joined the many caravans of covered wagons you'd see along the Iowa River, waiting to cross on the ferries. By the way, here are some of the rates the ferrymen charged. For each man on foot, 6.5 cents. For each man and horse, 12.5 cents. For each horse and carriage, 25 cents. For each head of hogs or sheep, 3 cents. Just before he left, Clark, being a smart thinker, gave power of attorney to his brother-in-law, F.H. Lee, to watch over and take care of his wife and 742-acre farm, which later became the James McAllister Charles Showers Farm. He went out to California and did some mining. His friend Myers died out there. Then 7 years later, Clark returned to Iowa City on a horse. Well, he was in for a surprise. Turns out his wife had divorced him on grounds of desertion. Well, they had a name for those ladies then, California widows. Turns out she and her brother, Mr. Lee, had sold the farm illegally. Well, Clark was certainly mispleased. He got two lawyers, a Mr. Farrell and a Mr. Templin, you know, Templin Road up by City Park, who reassured him the farm was legally his, and they advised him to build a cabin on it and live there. See, a nasty, drunken, ill-reputed man by the name of Boyd Wilkinson was living on Clark's farm, and he spent his time making life miserable for Clark, trying to get him to leave. Oh, Boyd and his cronies beat him up one night, and they burned his barn and 2 horses and shot his cabin full of holes. Now, Clark's friends helped protect him by forming the Committee of 100. And on May 11th, 1858, a group of 19 men and a barefoot boy got together and went to see Boyd. They tied his hands, loaded him onto their wagon, and headed for the Iowa River. All right, Boyd, you're as guilty as they come. Don't try and talk yourself out of this. We're going to do justice and hang you from that oak tree. And Wilkinson, quick on his feet as they got to the river, jumped from the wagon and dove into the river. Guess he thought he'd escape. But old Boyd wasn't thinking too clearly now, was he? His hands were tied. And he drowned. All 19 were indicted and sent to jail. Even one of the great citizens, Captain Frederick Macy Irish, an old whaling captain. He later was let out. His house is the famous Rose Hill over at 1415 East Davenport Street. He became a prominent citizen, very busy with the Democratic Party. The barefoot boy, that was Irish's son, John Irish, who later became an important state legislator and editor of the local newspaper called The Press, which was over there on the corner of Iowa Avenue and Clinton Street. Captain Irish died in a freak accident right here at the corner of Iowa Avenue and Dubuque Street. His horse-drawn sleigh collided with another. I don't know, lynching isn't pretty, that's for sure. Now, murders and evil things happen in Iowa City, of course, but I don't want to be the one to tell you. I don't think much of stories that make people feel bad. Fact, on July 7th, 1838, President Martin Van Buren appointed Robert Lucas as the first governor of the Iowa Territory. Fact, on May 4th, 1839, 3 commissioners, Chauncey Swan, Robert Ralston, and John Ronalds, selected the site for the town to be called Iowa City. Fact, the first structure in the original city was a cabin built in 1839 at what is now 327-329 Brown Street. It was the Allen Andrews Tavern, the first hotel in Iowa City. Fact, the first road to the capital city was constructed in 1839 by the U.S. government, called the National Road, or Military Road. This road followed Dillon's Furrow, named after Lyman Dillon. There. I think I've got them straight. Yes. They say Lyman Dillon plowed most of the furrow all by himself. Now there's a man with plenty of endurance. Can you imagine how he did it? I sure the heck don't know what all this hollering's about when it comes to wondering how this damn trench got made and who the hell paid for it and why it was even made in the first place. Damnation, get moving, you foot-dragging animals! I curse the black day I ever decided to take on this rotten task. Any fool, well, a strong fool, can plow a furrow. Just got to steer the blades away from some wild rocks so they won't come flying back and hit you in the head. Hillbeans, come on, keep moving! Now, these 5 oxen work without rest, which goes to show what a damn brainless animal an ox is. Hell, maybe they don't need a rest. But it's me who needs a swig of whiskey to get through this damn muddy sod. Oh, it may be lovely black soil to the greenest farmer, but it's thick as molasses when it's wet. Now, people can keep arguing and yakking about whether I'm doing all this labor just so some young pioneers who get their little selves lost in the hills and trees won't get hurt by those Indians out there. Hell, have them make signs, for God's sake. So maybe it's true. Maybe that hawk-faced army engineer, Mr. Timon. Yeah, maybe he did engage me in this activity. Mr. Dillon, I've heard you've got the finest oxen in Dubuque, and we're going to pay you a fine sum to guide these here road builders, the Langworthy brothers, safely on to Iowa City. Now, I'm counting in my head, and I wonder just how long this trip's going to be. And I figure it's going to be at least 100 miles, and with these slower than molasses in January beasts, it will take months. I wager these rosy-cheeked engineers are going to be building the road only so that mighty band of military men stationed in Dubuque, I saw them the other day, the Dragoons they call themselves, so they'll be able to reach Iowa City and get inside this new territory in the event of an Indian uprising. The Dragoons will have to keep the settlers pouring into this land from staking out claims from the Indians, or else. Come on, you clodhoppers, pull! Pull! Well, Lyman needn't have worried. There was never any trouble with the Indians. Today, you can drive on Route 1 out towards Mount Vernon and think of old Lyman Dillon. His long, deep furrow was made into a dirt road by the Langworthy brothers and then finally paved with tar. Professor Valentine, you're an engineer. Tell me, don't you think it's a puzzle that from the early days in Iowa City, all the roads were left plain dirt? To be dusty all summer, muddy in the spring, and frozen in the winter? Why did it take until the 1920s to get most of them paved? Yes. Yes, that must be. Well, certainly the railroad was the main reason. Now, when they came in, they linked every important town together, so there wasn't any pressing need to get them paved. Maybe so. All I know is, when I delivered milk and ice cream in this town, it was a dirty, messy job, that's for sure. Listen. Do you hear that? It's the Rock Island! The Rock Island Line! It's coming to Iowa City for the very first time! Hurry! Down to the Johnson Street Depot. It's New Year's Eve, 1858, and we're going to help lay the final ties. Did you hear? If it gets here before midnight, it will receive a $50,000 bonus. Yes, a good idea. Build a bonfire over there and over there. They got to keep these workers warm. It should be steaming in here soon. Oh, no. Did you hear? The engine's frozen up. Never gonna make it by midnight. Well, that's money they'll never see. Wait! It's coming! Oh, my, how did they do that? They used pitch bars. Pitch bars? What's that? The Iron Monster's here! Jumping over the yellow line. Oh, wow, and look at her! Isn't she something? From Chicago to Denver and Colorado Springs, she's going to be the Iron Horse for years to come. And from here would be the arrival and departure of immigrants, gold diggers, pioneers, and soldiers. Many, many boys lifted themselves up the high steps of the Iron Horse, hoping to return. The boys from the Civil War, the Spanish-America War, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. Fact. The Rock Island was the 9th longest railroad in the U.S. Fact. It was the 2nd longest in Iowa. Fact. The Iowa Championship football teams of 1899 and 1900, 1921, and 1922 rode the Rock Island, as did the Iron Men of 1939 and the Rose Bowl teams of 1956 and 1958. Fact. Due to bankruptcy, the Rock Island Line stopped in 1980. seems I've slipped into a nostalgic memory. I used to help my grandchildren place pennies on the railroad track at Greenwood Drive to be flattened by the Corn Belt rocket. Well, hello, Ed. I'm wandering now. You just tell me to stop. I get carried away when it comes to history. I don't know why. I'm just a talker, I guess. And I suppose this ceremony today has got me thinking about some things. I'll just pipe down and let Ed do what he has to do.
This is indeed a great day in Iowa City. With our eyes set on the future, we are embracing progress with all of its promises for a better life for future generations. Today, as we break new ground, each one of us can be proud to be part of Iowa City and to know one of Iowa City's greatest citizens, Irving Weber, a third-generation citizen in Iowa City on his paternal side and a fourth generation on his maternal side. He was educated in the Iowa City schools and graduated from City High School and the University of Iowa. His business years were devoted to the dairy and wholesale ice cream business. It would be impossible to list all his awards, so I'll only mention a few. The official Iowa City historian, was inducted into the university's Athletic Hall of Fame, and he's a lifelong active member of the First United Methodist Church. He has served as Iowa City School Board President. He has written over 850 historical articles for the Iowa City Press Citizen, which are published in 8 volumes and have raised more than $75,000 for site and hearing conservation projects in the name of the Iowa City Lions Club. Irving Weber has insisted that not one dime go toward his personal gain. In Naperville, Illinois, the Weber Zimmerman Building is named after him. Perhaps his highest honor has been the recent naming of the Irving B. Weber Elementary School here in Iowa City. And now, as we stand here at the beautiful intersection of Iowa Avenue and Clinton Street, with the Capitol behind us, the great expanse of Iowa Avenue ahead of us, I am privileged to ask you to join me in giving a hand to the individual for whom the Irving Weber Deluxe Shopping Plaza will be named. Irving, come on down. Grab a shovel.
Thank you, Ed. I don't know why all the attention. I'm just an old man who happens to have a good memory. Incidentally, does everyone know Ed's grandfather was in the meat business here in Iowa City? You look like him around the eyes. Up until the late 1930s, everyone always bought their fresh meat from a meat market. I always enjoyed walking into Koza and Kaufman meat store and making a pattern in the thick sawdust on the floor. Every once in a while during the day, one of the employees would have to rake it even. At night, the sawdust was swept up and a fresh layer was put in for the next day. Well, naturally, sawdust is banned from many meat markets today. But the only time I get to smell it is when I visit one of the elementary schools and they have a hamster cage in the room. Speaking of cages, reminds me of the greatest day in Iowa City, and that was the day the circus came to town. Oh, it was bigger than homecoming. There's nothing like a parade to get a town working together and coming together. I miss how we don't get a chance to do that as often. I think many of you would enjoy it. Why, everyone would stop everything and prepare for it. Barnum and Bailey, I remember the most. They would arrive in 5 different trains. I'd get up at the crack of dawn and watch them unload llamas, camels, tigers, lions. And elephants. At least 50 elephants. Performing ones. The parade started at noon, and they go right up here on Clinton, north to Market, east on Market, then to Gilbert, back through the business section. Hold your horses! Hold your horses! The elephants are coming! Zebras, showgirls on show wagons, big bands playing. At 7 o'clock at night, the show started in the main tent. 1,200 people helped set up the circus, and it always went like clockwork. Unless there was rain. The mud slowed everything down. Once, Otto McAllister and I skipped school to help put up the animal cage. It was a big steel arrangement, and everything fit into place. I can still put that cage together today. Say, there I go again. Ed, you want me to dig out the first dirt for this new shopping plaza. Ordinarily, I'd walk right down and do it, but not today. The fact of the matter is, I've been meaning to get this off my chest. I certainly don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I feel that this particular location, Iowa Avenue between Clinton and Dubuque Streets, is absolutely wrong for a plaza. I've thought so from the beginning, and I'm sorry to see it get this far. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm all for progress. I was a businessman, like many of you, for over 50 years, so I know too well how one has to stay on top of the times. I did, Kim. I was able to go to most of the planning meetings, and unfortunately my wife, Martha, took a turn for the worse last winter, so I made extra trips out to the nursing home. She never complains. It's a good place to be. They do all right. Except the food isn't so good. Martha always had sort of a keen sense of taste. I talk to her twice a day now over the telephone. We've been married 69 years. She says she thinks she's going to keep me. This morning I told her how they're tearing up the sidewalks on Highway 6. I suppose it will make it easier to turn into the Pizza Hut and Jiffy Lube. I told her the Hawkeyes are playing Purdue tonight, although I know she has no interest in sports. I took over that new book, Shipping News, by Annie Prue. I don't know if she'll like it. It's always difficult choosing books for Martha. She would spend whole days getting through the Wall Street Journal. I've got a pile of Wall Street journals on the dining room table. There are so many good articles, I get disgusted that I can never finish them. You know, I had quite a few business occasions to be in Denver and Colorado Springs. And Martha and I would get on the train here at 4:30, go up to the club car and have a cocktail. And I'd look out the window and see our house. We'd go to the diner for dinner and then go to bed. Wake up in the morning with Pikes Peak in the distance. Once we rode the bullet train in Japan, where our son Willis was stationed with the Air Force. Well, we went around the world. But my problem was I never wanted to be anywhere else but Iowa City. You're right, Kim. Everyone has a right to voice their feelings at the planning meetings, and I listened to many of you bring up good reasons why there should be a shopping plaza at this location, and I kept my mouth shut. A rarity for me. But at the time, it just seemed too personal a reason why I disapprove of this plan. When the city was laid out, Iowa Avenue was to be the street in Iowa City. It was 120 feet wide, the widest street. The other streets, Madison, Capitol, Clinton, Washington, and Jefferson, were 100 feet wide. Iowa Avenue was outstanding. We called it the Boulevard. It used to be just mud leading downtown, and it was almost impassable in the spring. That's why the boardwalks along the sides were useful. We didn't have cement walks until much later. It was always fun trying to knock off a friend into the mud. One couldn't go barefoot because of all the splinters. Do you know what the biggest business was on Iowa Avenue those early years? It was the wood business. All the homes and businesses were heated with wood. Red oak or white oak or hickory, they were the best for heating. Now, farmers would drive their wagons into town and sell their loads of wood right in this area. Wood was sold by the cord. I checked with Will Goodwin when he was 95 years old. He was a lifelong Iowa Citian. He told me a cord is 128 cubic feet, 8 feet long by 4 feet high. He recalled a cord sold for $4, and it would take 5 to 8 cords of wood to heat a house. That's $20 or so for the year. In the 1890s, the buildings along here were Close Hall, the University of Iowa's YMCA and YWCA, and the chemistry building. And way back in 1839, my grandfather and grandmother, Andrew and Nancy, met at a Methodist meeting. There was a log cabin, sort of a hotel, on the corner of Iowa Avenue and Dubuque Street where they stayed and later got married. My grandfather on my father's side came here in 1857 on the railroad. He was a blacksmith and a wheelwright. He built carriages and wagons, and his two trades were in much demand. The stagecoach headquarters had up to 136 horses. My grandfather started his own blacksmith shop at 119 East Iowa Avenue, right here, where the Easy Place Chinese restaurant is. He ran it until 1870. And then my father and uncle learned the business. They never taught me how to shoe a horse because it was dangerous work and I wasn't big enough. I knew how to fix wheels, though. The horseshoeing went out with the coming of the automobile, so they sold the shop in 1921. There was many a time when Dad would say to me, "Irving, no matter how fractious the horse was, there was never any profanity used in our shop." He'd also point out that he and President Hoover had something in common. We were both sons of blacksmiths. But Hoover went on further. Iowa Avenue was paved in 1907. Of course, it was such a grand avenue because the Capitol building was at one end. I grew up at 927 Iowa Avenue. It was on the last block before Woodlawn. My father had the house built in 1895. The day Mother and Father were married, they walked 2 blocks into their new house. They moved in and they lived in that house until Father died in that house, and Mother lived another 10 years in it, 61 years total. I always think of it as a fine, elegant house with a large landscaped lawn. Morning! Morning! Willis, you coming over later? Well, Dad finished the basketball rings last night. Well, tell George we'll get a good game going. I'm about to mow Mrs. Shambaugh's lawn, then beat some rugs at Mrs. Horn's, clean some furniture at Mrs. Yetter's, and then clean out the fireplace ashes for Mrs. McBride. I'll catch up with you at the club. Go, 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 Tigers! Wait till you see the pennant Cousin Leslie designed. Tiger Athletic Club. I got it nailed over the barn door. Next to the No Girls Allowed sign. Say, Ruth, you were younger than we were, but do you remember how Dad made everything for us? Oh, he could do so many things, and he was happy to do it for all the boys who would congregate at our house. He made skis for all of us. Also bobsleds, which could carry 8 or 10 of us. Oh, they were real sturdy. We'd tear down Governor Street on those sleds. Track, track for the city hack! Track, track for the city hack! Why we said that, I don't know. I remember all the birthday parties I would go to. You always brought a present to your friend. I remember one of my best friends, Willis Nutting's birthday party. I got the idea to have some fun, and I went under the table and pinched the boy's legs. No girls at those parties. Oh, that was one of the great mistakes in my life. I started pinching, and they all started kicking. I felt lucky to get out alive. Birthday parties were fun. We got toys. Willis gave me a hammer. I still have it. 28, 29, 30, ready or not, here I come. Behind the curtain. Behind the chair. Under the table. Aha, Willis! Not in the wood box again, are you, George? Aha! Yes, Mother, I'm coming. Charlie, I see your shoes. This curtain. And how do you do, Tom? Willis, I've already found you. You can't hide again. Yes, Mother, coming, coming. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the one to grow on. I wish. No, I'm not going to tell you. Now, Dad, do it now, Dad. My golly. It's wonderful. Mother, isn't it beautiful? Of course, those early electric lights were 25 cycle, and there was a certain flickering to them, but they were such an improvement of what we had before. We had kerosene lamps that were always getting smudged up, and every day you had to trim the wicks and take care of them. They called kerosene coal oil, and it cost 8 cents a gallon. One nice thing about those lamps was that after every supper, we would remove the tablecloth and pad and place the lamp on the quarter-sawed oak dining table, and Mother, Father, and I would spend so many pleasant hours telling stories, working on arithmetic. Irving, here's a tip, Dad would say. When numbers are transposed, like 72 and 27, the difference between them, in this case 45, is always divisible by 9. And Mother would read King Arthur and his knights out loud. Sir Lancelot was always my hero. Sir Lancelot of Ralston Crick. That was the closest creek to our house. People always like recalling their days with kerosene lamps. I phoned Della Grizzle when she was 96 and living in the Solon nursing home. She remembers that they never carried the lamps upstairs to bed, just candles. And Hugh Dunlap, when he was 93, told me that in his home in Kelowna, the lamps with the round wick produced the most light. That's because it had more surface to burn. Still, the lamps required daily attending, so it was a great improvement when we got electricity. Well, we still weren't modernized, however. We still had the necessaries out back. Everyone called it that to be polite. Our house wasn't modernized until 1910, when we got a hot water furnace. Now that was a big year. I just can't believe how much progress aviation has made since I saw the first airplane in Iowa City take off in 1910. It was out at the Johnson County Fairgrounds, which was then out by City High School. Captain Baldwin from St. Louis was the fellow to fly, and he sure didn't look the part. He weighed 240 pounds. However, he did have experience flying in balloons and dirigibles. Oh, my, but Iowa City was air-minded that day. They treated it as a big event. Crowds poured in from all over. A large delegation from West Liberty arrived on the Rock Island train, and as they say, the whole west end of Muscatine County piled off the train. Local trains from Tiffin, Oxford, and Marengo also carried in crowds. The Cedar Rapids Commercial Club and the 53rd Regimental Band came on a special train. At 9:30, the Iowa City Marine Band played. At 11 o'clock, the Alert Hose team made an exhibition run down Clinton Street, and an automobile parade started at 11:30. And then Baldwin stepped into his plane, called the Red Devil, a flimsy biplane with a 50-horsepower, 8-cylinder engine, weighing 240 pounds. I think the wheels were bicycle wheels. It needed 40 miles an hour to take off, but the wind was acting up, and Baldwin was forced to land in a cornfield. The commercial club sponsoring the event gave everyone wind checks for the following day, and Baldwin's first flight then was a huge success. He flew for 4 miles at an altitude of 100 to 150 feet at a speed of 30 miles per hour. Oh, I could hear him as he got out of the plane. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and all the children, thank you. What you have just seen was merely an introduction to this afternoon's activities, for I will make 2 more flights. Thank you, thank you. This time I shall fly towards the southeast, where there is better air with fewer air pockets. And Baldwin stepped back up into his plane and gave a cheerful wave and drove down the dirt runway, but this time he flew straight up, much, much too steeply, and I saw the wings brush between the upper branches of some trees, yet he got around them. But then he hit an air pocket and dropped, hit the top of Mr. Tucker's barn and crashed to the ground. The plane was demolished. Baldwin was pinned under the wreckage. I saw his legs sticking out from under a wing. Mr. Tucker was the first to get to him and pull him to safety. Fortunately, Captain Baldwin was not seriously hurt. Everyone was all agog about the flight of an airplane. Another airplane crash in Iowa City was in the fall of 1919, while a football game was going on at the old Iowa field. Herbert Gartsky told me that he and his older brother George were painting their family home on Madison Street, where the Memorial Union is today. They saw a plane fly over Iowa Field. It continued north, hit a flock of black birds, the motor sputtered, the pilot veered across the Iowa River and crashed in the cornfield, about where Hancher Auditorium is today. The Gartsky brothers rowed their boat across the river and saw that the pilot was safe, but the plane demolished. The motor was buried 3 feet in the cornfield. Excuse me? Now, just 1 minute. No, Ed, that's all right. I'll answer the young gentleman myself. Now, what's wrong? I will move it, as you so eloquently put it, but I will in my own time. It seems to me you're being a bit impatient. I don't want to be contradictory with you, but I suggest you sit back down. Now, tell me, do you live in Iowa City? 7 years. Which street? Oh, yes, Bowery Street. The Dutch word for farm. Which house? Oh, why, that's a fine house. Right across from the Swishers. Got a nice tin roof still. Nice to see it kept up. Do you mind my asking what you do here in Iowa City? You're going to open a yogurt shop and a coffee shop. It's amazing how popular yogurt's become. I just can't eat it. It's got no taste. Now, I love ice cream. Always have. Of course, the trouble in this country is that people are so fat conscious, they cut the fat down. Low-fat ice cream? Why, it's no good without butter fat. Oh, everyone wants to drink skim milk. Why, we used to run it on the dairy floor because no one wanted skim milk then. We used to use milk solids in ice cream. Now some of these ice creams use buttermilk solids and whey solids. And the ice cream with those, it's got body, but it's not good ice cream flavor-wise. Now, I check on the carton and see if it has buttermilk or whey solids. And if it has, I don't buy it. Of course, those Tom and Jerry and the Haagen-Dazs, I don't think any of those use buttermilk or whey solids. No, they use quite a bit of butter fat. You know, it used to be a state law that you could use 12% butter fat, and now it's 10%. I always liked the ice cream business better than the milk business. I suppose because I like ice cream so well. I worked at the Sidwell ice cream plant during summers when I was in college. It was where the Lindquist Measurement Center is today. And when I graduated from college in 1922, I went to work for Sidwell's. We had countless flavors. Vanilla was always the best seller. And we always tried to use a pure vanilla that had a real delicate bouquet. Strawberry was always a big seller. We would put up our own strawberries. We'd get the Senator Dunlop strawberry from this area. And they just had a delightful flavor. They were so much better than the shipped ones from California. Now, they didn't ship well. We would wash the berries and sugar them, 2 pounds of strawberries to a pound of sugar, and then we'd crush them in a 5-gallon metal ice cream can and then freeze it. In the early days, we'd take the cans, pack them in heavy wooden tubs, refrigerate them in cracked ice and rock salt. Once the dealer got the ice cream, he would take them to his salted ice wooden cabinet or to a soda fountain and then repack them in cracked ice and rock salt. Well, they required repacking every day. Well, with electric refrigeration, it's much easier today. We secured 2 growers near Keokuk along the banks of the Mississippi, and these 2 growers would pick the strawberries, wash them, we have a truck there and bring them up to Iowa City. We get 3 different church groups to stem and wash them. The Methodists do it one day, the Baptists the other, the Christian church another. Then we got the idea to use one church group. They'd bring the berries in from a field to a shed, and these ladies would wash the berries, stem them, and we'd have our truck there, and they'd be freezing them by the time we got to Iowa City. One of my hobbies was ice cream molds. I think we had 300 to 400 different molds. They were made of lead, divided into halves, which were hinged, and each half would be filled with vanilla ice cream. Then we'd place the mold between 2 12-inch square slabs of dry ice. In 2 minutes, they'd be hard. And then we'd color it. We could make an ice cream Santa Claus, a candle, an ear of corn. For instance, Santa Claus. We'd color his shoes red, his coat red, his eyes blue, and we put different colored presents in his sack. And we had mold after mold after mold. But the finest was the Capitol molds, which were ordered for big university receptions. We'd get the dentistry department and the engineering department to help us because a delicate inlay had to be made. If you didn't do it right, when you opened the mold, the windows could tear off. So it took a lot of know-how. An apple farmer out east would make the mold out of wood, and then we'd cast it in lead. And once the ice cream was ready, we'd paint the top gold. We'd put a little miniature flag on top, color the windows like it was night. The Memorial Union offered to store them when they weren't being used. Well, when the war came along, we didn't make molds for quite a long time. And we kept asking the union if they were in safekeeping, and they assured us they were. Well, after the war was over, the molds were no longer around. The mystery is they're showing up at antique shows nowadays. I hear they sell for $175. The oddest order we ever got was for 3 dozen eyeballs for a staff dinner of the University Department of Ophthalmology. I thought we'd start with the football mold and work from there, but I was quickly reminded that the eyeball was round, not almond-shaped, so we started with the orange mold. We'd smooth the surface with warm water to release the mold, and then made some of the eyes blue, brown, and painted in red capillaries. There was a request that one of the eyes be very red for one of the guests who like to celebrate enthusiastically on Saturday nights. I always felt a relief that certain other departments at the hospital didn't come up with similar ideas for staff dinners. Young man, what's your name? Alex. You're going into business. I hope I'm not taking up too much of your attention, but I want to stress to you that I'm a lucky man, because I've been a part of something that truly makes me proud. And I believe everyone has that opportunity in life. If you get an idea, and really believe in it, and want to see it succeed, then you have to constantly stay on top of it. I had a certain flair for the dramatic, an ability to see and push this idea, and I was just an ordinary student. I want you to understand that. During World War II, myself and 4 other gentlemen who were in the ice cream business in Wisconsin and Iowa realized we would have to compete with Borden, Seal Test, and Meadow Gold once the war was over. How could a small independent ice cream business be heard over the huge guns of Seal Test? Their advertising budgets are huge. Well, we have to form a cooperative. What do you mean, Irving? Well, we gather the independent plants together and form one large company. It might work, it might not. The 5 of us met once a month for 3 years in Chicago. We started a tradition of finishing every dinner with a chocolate nut sundae. And if nuts weren't available, one of the members always kept a box of nut meats in his pocket. To this day, I love a chocolate nut sundae after a great meal. Finally, we came up with an aggressive advertising program which created Quality Checked, an international cooperative of dairy processing companies. The big red check stands for the highest standards in freshness, flavor, and nutrition. Today, Quality Checked has more than $3 billion in sales, is distributed in 42 states, and is spreading all over the world. It's gone beyond my wildest dreams. And our motto was, made by men who love ice cream. Well, I'm wandering again, and I know Ed wants to wrap this event up. Please don't misunderstand me here, Ed. I am honored your committee voted to name this enormous project for me, but you know me. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just a man, an old man, with a good memory, a way with numbers, and I do have a good sense of grammar, I think. I want to stress the fact that in my mediocrity, I have good grammar. After I retired, I began writing articles for the Iowa City Press-Citizen in 1973. Bill Eganton was the managing editor at the time, and I can't say enough good things for Mr. Eganton. He helped me in so many ways. I'd drop into his office, sit right next to him, and he would patiently read my articles, giving me guidance, making a suggestion here and there about my writing. He never once interrupted our business with something else. The paper didn't want just articles about history. They wanted to make a game out of it. So I came up with the idea of showing a picture, giving some clues, and the answer would be at the bottom. Not very difficult, but people enjoyed it so much. It became very popular, so I kept writing articles. It seemed a fun thing to do. I enjoy walking around Iowa City and taking pictures of houses. Oh, I'm not much of a photographer, that's for certain. I just like taking pictures, and I wrote about anything that came into my mind. Barbara's Bake Shop, the College of Nursing, the Englert Theater, Sarah Bernhardt's visit to Iowa City, the Iowa City Public Library, the influenza epidemic, how they moved the science building across Jefferson Street in 1905. It's called Calvin Hall today. The whole building, from April to August, moving a foot or two a day with a crew of skilled men from Chicago, 800 jack screws, 675 rollers, 4 feet long, and 27 carloads of wooden timbers to be used as cribbing under the building as it moved. Yo, heave! And each crew member would turn his screw jack half a turn. The building would move an inch. It had to pass the old dental building, so it had to be on its axis as it moved forward. Oh, it was such a fantastic job. They didn't even move a test tube. Mercy Hospital, the Paris Cleaner Building, Iowa River floods, Helen Mott, the top pretzel twister, and Iowa City battles. I like to think we learn from controversy, and I quote a speech I heard at the Herbert Hoover Library Museum dedication at West Branch. Most nations would make sounder and wiser decisions in solving their problems if they were better students of their own history. How true! Take the biggest headache for early Iowa Cityans. Animals. All over the place. Horses and oxen, dogs running free, cows in the streets, and hogs. Hundreds and hundreds of hogs rooting out the garbage. In 1864, the city council passed a law prohibiting hogs from running at large in Iowa City. Put up your hogs! All who disregard the ordinance by allowing their hogs to run at large hereafter, that they may expect to pay the full penalty of the law. And the Republicans favored the law, but the Democrats opposed it. Later, there were battles about the expense of filling in the mud streets, battles over establishing a municipally owned light and power company, and angry sentiments as to where to build City High School. And of course, urban renewal, which has created bitter battles, but since they have been recent, I will not relay the details. Breweries, Dunkel's Saloon, the mayors of Iowa City, the Great Depression, and the origins of why Iowa is called the Hawkeye State. There are probably lots of theories, but it refers to the great hero in the popular novel The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. I'll leave it up to you to learn the details. As for Herky the Hawk, that came by from a statewide contest arranged by Frank Havlicek, the Iowa Athletic Department ticket and business manager. The winner was John Franklin of Belle Plaine. The name comes from Hercules in Greek mythology. There are so many interesting stories about Iowa City. I wish I had time to tell them all. Like the Civil War, how John Brown moved slaves through Iowa City, through underground tunnels. Some right across the street where I grew up. Dr. Bowen's house at 914 Iowa Avenue, and the Pownell house at 1602 North Dubuque Street, and the Glasgow home at 834 North Johnson Street. Then there's the story about the goose tragedy in 1891. An article in the Iowa City Daily Republican tells the whole story, and I quote, "Iowa City's metropolitan characteristics were never more plainly or forcibly evidenced than last night. Our readers will remember that the day was remarkably clear. About 7 o'clock, however, a great change suddenly occurred. The sky grew overcast, dark and gloomy. During the day, it was noticed that thousands of wild geese were flying northward, and our local hunters were out in force. As the day was drawing to a close, these flocks of birds began to seek a resting place for the night, and soon the ponds and swamps south of the city were covered with them. They were received by volley after volley of shot. With fluttering wings and terrified screams, the startled geese mounted to the air again and started northward. When they were fairly over the city, the sudden blackness of the atmosphere came upon them. Blacker and blacker grew the night, and louder were heard the honk, honk, honk of the geese. Then came the remarkable occurrence we refer to. The poor geese, lost and blinded, were suddenly attracted by the bright glare of the electric lights of the city that all at once pierced the murky gloom. These brilliant rays of light, dazzling and powerful, were to the deluded geese like a magnet to the steel. Having circled round and round, seeking some Mecca, these lights promised them a haven of rest. They attempted to find footing or resting place upon the globes, but coming with extreme violence against the great glass spheres, they were hurled back with broken necks, legs, and wings, and fell helpless or dying to the ground, which, in the vicinity of each electric light, was thickly strewn with the bodies of the fallen birds. Those lights were along the College Street Bridge, and it said that many people were knocked down by the falling birds. But luckily, no one was fatally injured. Well, all this information may mean peanuts to you, and I don't mean to be taking up all of your time. I wish I could hear all your stories. Ed, you have been very patient. I might as well come right to the point. This location is a very important one to me. I have so many memories mixed in with Clinton and Dubuque and obviously Iowa Avenue. I can't allow you to name the plaza after me. That's right. I'm embarrassed to have to admit that my father and grandfather's business mean that much to me. And I think of my mother, who was so involved with the school board and the Methodist Church. There are still a few landmarks left that she knew by heart. It just makes me sad that they're going to be torn down. I'll never forget one afternoon as I was dashing out of our house to play, Mother called after me, "Look, Irving, you can see clear down to the Capitol. There's nothing in the way of your eye." Oh, sure, things change, and I've watched them all my life, but I would feel uncomfortable with my name on this particular building. I know your committee made the decision with the best intentions, and I feel pleased about that. I'm sure you can honor someone else, like a president, or a doctor, or a teacher, or just a fine ordinary person, which would make everyone ask, why was he or she so great? Because there are so many interesting people here in Iowa City. Why, they come from all over the world, and they each contribute something to this fine city. I'm glad I lived my childhood here. I'd hate to give up my memories of Iowa City. Well, it's been nice visiting with you. I thank you, Cal. Thank you. I know you understand. Sorry, Harry. I know how hard you're working on this project. It will be a glorious shopping plaza, I know. Say, you did a marvelous job taking care of this bell for me. I appreciate that. Thank you. Maybe someday something will be named after you. Wouldn't that be grand? I've always thought I'd like a parade named after me. So every year the whole city would gather together and have a great day.